There is emerging on the face of the earth a new human, an infinite human, and that human is you. Welcome to the Infinite Human Talk Show with your host.
Hello, you divine, infinite human beings. You're all that is, ever has been, and ever shall be. And this is part of my series, In Search of America, and I am here at the birthplace of America. And here's a obelisk, and can you guess where I am? That is the question. Does anyone even know where it all started? I know because my ancestors came here. I am from one of the first lineages that came from England to this country and created the first lasting English settlement. You guessed it, Jamestown. Now I'm here in Jamestown. And it's very interesting because history repeats itself until you get the aha and change it, okay? Not only you have to understand, you have to change it. And I spent the other day at ARA, the Edgar Cayce, and I bought the transcripts that he had of Atlantis. These were documented, transcribed readings that he did for people. Now, he started reading, and all of a sudden, past lives started popping up, which, you know, scared the bejeez out of him and his followers because he was a Sunday school teacher from Hopkins, Kentucky. And then, as he progressed, another thing started appearing. The past lives went beyond recorded history into a time of Atlantis. But what he was doing was he was trying to heal people of karmic patterns that was creating dis-ease. His readings, his hypnotic state was to help them to find cures for their ailments. And he began to, a lot of stuff going on here. He began to find out that a lot of these karmic patterns kept repeating themselves, and they had been from Atlantis. And in fact, I'll even go further to say Atlantis has been repeating in a time loop, an artificial time loop for millions upon millions of years. But that's aside, and that's my book, The Infinite Human. But basically, these karmic patterns keep repeating until you break them and change them. And he also said that many of these Atlanteans, Lemurians, are incarnating now in this time plane because we're coming up to the same choices, the same decision, whether to recreate the past and continue in a time loop, which I call 3D Earth timeline, going nowhere, which the Hopi prophecy talked about. The two-hearted people that ends abruptly, the line, or we're going to change the karmic pattern. So, since I am American, since I am actually from here, since I have chosen to live in another country, and I have been talking about, hey, you know, America, wake up, we've got to shift things, because I think a lot of Atlantean starseeds, or whatever, you know, you're from all over, but anyway, a lot of starseeds have incarnated in America because this is where we are right now. These are the shores of Atlantis, and Atlantis was huge. It reached all the way, you know, in its great days. It kept getting smaller, but the Lemurians came to Atlantis when their continent sunk, and then it reaches from the Yucatan to the Mississippi Basin, according to Edgar Cayce, all the way, of course, to England, and then parts of Europe and Egypt, you know, the Mediterranean, Crete, all that. So even into, so it was huge. And this is a long time, but now I'm bringing this up because we are now recreating Atlantis here, we have, and we're choosing whether to continue in that loop or to heal. So I was reading last night his transcriptions of people, and what it was that he called them an entity, and they were like just their daily lives. And many of them, there was a class division, of two classes, and there was like those who, were the wealthy, and then the slaves or the workers who were considered non-humans, Black Lives Matter, right? Okay, so that was going on even back then. And, so there was a lot of stuff that started that caused the fall of Atlantis. So what happened here, okay? I'm going to give you the real history. I actually went to the settlement where all the school kids were being taken. That was down the road, and it's a recreation, and something inside me said, nah, this isn't right. So I came to the real site. This is the real place where this all happened, where our country was formed. The karmic patterns of our country was formed. Now, on December 6th, 1606, yes, I've got my dates right, but it was a 666 configuration that caught my attention. Interesting. The three ships set out. And no, this is not the Nina, the Maria, and the Santa Maria. That's not the real deal, okay? This is where it happened. It started. This was where America began. And they were sent by the Virginia Company, a corporation. One of the ships was named Godspeed. Interesting. So it was all men. I just saw the number, but like 434 men and boys. Okay, that first mistake. Secondly, okay, they came here with, very little. They were here actually by a corporation to make a profit, And of course, they were ill-prepared. They created a fort, the first settlement here in America, English settlement. And they started to starve to death the first winter. Surprise, surprise, because they just didn't know how to communicate with Mother Earth, to live off the land. They had none of those skills. So the truth is, the Potomac Indians, and the chief's name, God, I can't pronounce it. Hopefully I'll do it in a later video. But they were frightened of the Indians, so they built a fort. But actually, the Indians took pity on them because they were starving. And this is a history that repeats itself, because I also saw that in Kentucky. The Indians took pity on the settlers who just had no clue as to how to take care of themselves, how to live in harmony with the earth. They were clueless, which is a European, white man kind of way. All right, so they actually brought them food, and they survived. Now, what happened, though, instead of what could have happened, and this would be the cure, is that they began to be grateful, form a union, learn how to, become self-sufficient, learn how to plant, hunt, learn the medicinal properties and the nutritional properties of the Mother Earth that the Indians, these natives, could have taught them. These descendants, most likely from Atlantis, okay? But no, they didn't do that, did they? What they did instead was just wait for the corporation, the Virginia Company, to send reinforcements and food, the food that they could eat. And then what they did was they planted tobacco. Instead of planting food, they planted tobacco. Doesn't that sound so familiar today? The corporations are dictating what we eat, what we plant, what we think, everything. So they planted tobacco because it's a cash crop, and it could make a lot of money for the investors back in England. And they began to get pissed off at the Indians because they weren't giving them more food for free. And that's what started the wars. And if you don't believe me, I looked this up in Wikipedia today. This is my kind of emotional interpretation, but you can, if you make Wikipedia your god, you can see what happened. Now, this is also memories, and because I've come here many times as a child, and past life memories. But what it is that, it was a refusal to become self-sufficient, the wrong allegiance to England and to corporations. And, they could have come together in such a beautiful, peaceful way of sharing knowledge of Mother Earth with the latest technology. Of course, for them were those big ships, and, they had information that could have been shared. But they didn't do that. And they planted a cash crop. They started warring with the Indians, which, if you look around in Virginia, there aren't any Indians. So these treaties that they kept making, they kept breaking. Obviously, we don't even have to guess at that. And then, because they had this huge cash crop, a few years later, they went over to Africa and they took a bunch of, stole a bunch of indigenous people there, brought them over, made them slaves to serve this greed of the corporations. So that was the birth of America, right here where I'm standing. You don't have to go through, it just spread. I mean, the same story kept repeating itself everywhere. But it was a story of not becoming self-sufficient, first of all, and putting your allegiance with corporations. Hello. You see the Groundhog Day time loop we're in. And just taking advantage of the indigenous people, seeing them as lesser than, and then, going over to, let me get the sun here, to Africa and getting slaves to work the land to make the landholders richer. So that is the birth of America, and that is the karmic debt that we've incurred, and that is what we have to change. We, the starseeds, the Orpheans, those who are going to make a difference here, we have to change that. We have to stop, first of all, putting our allegiance towards corporations, becoming self-sufficient, working in harmony with each other, okay, and Mother Earth. And it's very simple. The cure is very simple. That's in this Make America Great Again. Well, guess what, guys? We didn't start out so great. So what we have to do is, make Atlantis great again, because it was the golden age there when we did follow the law of one. But that's another story. Okay, I'm going to continue my walk around Jamestown. Hello. This is the truth about Pocahontas. Behind me is a statue of Pocahontas. And like many, we grew up as a child thinking of Pocahontas at Thanksgiving and, how wonderful she was, that she married whoever, John Roth, really, not John Smith, and saved his life, and, how wonderful it was that the two cultures came together. But the truth be told, Pocahontas did come. And she was the daughter of the chief who took mercy on these poor starving men and brought food, trying to help them, heal them, probably brought them some herbs so they wouldn't die of all the diseases they got the first year. And she was helping them. How kind. And this is what we did, the Americans, my descendants, my ancestors. They kidnapped her, stole her from her tribe, from her father, from her family, brought her here, forced her to become a Christian, gave her Christianity lessons and baptized her, and then forced her to marry one of the guys to keep the peace. This is a very reoccurring thing. I write about a lot, about the whole thing of stealing women, using their bloodlines to, create other races of people. She probably had very high Atlantean bloodlines, and she ended up dying in England, and I'm sure she missed her family. But that's the truth about Pocahontas. So behind me is Captain John Smith. I guess he's credited as one of the captains, that founded this settlement, the first lasting fort in town in America, where America was born. One of the captains of the 3 ships that came here. And behind me are some graveyards, and there are a lot of graves because a lot of people died the first year. They died of all kinds of infections and diseases because they just didn't know how to adapt and take care of themselves, and they didn't realize that a lot of the medicines were just growing right under their feet. And they didn't have that knowledge. But as I said before, I believe Pocahontas brought that knowledge and information. I think she was divinely inspired to do this. I think she was a very good person who got, like I said, kidnapped and converted to Christianity. So this is, I think, a very important message that we can learn also, because I see so many very powerful, loving, kind, giving, especially women who have come here to serve from very high levels. our good intentions misused, being caught up in the agenda, as obviously all these people were. It was all part of an agenda. There was a lot of dark hands behind it, with using the corporations like the Virginia Company. After that, it became, of course, the property of King James, and then England, and then it still is, basically, but that's another story. So, the point is, though, you have to really be clear. At that time, perhaps that was all that was available, but now we have a lot of, we're changing the karma. We're stepping out. We're not giving our power away to these other entities. We're not giving our power away to corporations, hopefully. And how does that start? That starts by being self-sufficient, by not waiting for them, by not needing them. Because when you need them, you become part of their agenda. And I see that happening. So, beautiful, beautiful place to begin a country. And of course, there's always been the fight of good and bad. We've had many good people, and we've had a dark agenda going on. But it's time to just not give our power away to these dark agendas. The time has come. We're in an ascension cycle. So I hope that's the lesson you've taken now for creating the new America. Not make it great again, create a new America, a new Atlantis, and to create it in harmony with the law of one on the 5D timelines. Ciao for now. So over there's a plaque commemorating Queen Elizabeth's visit here and paying respects to the first English colony that survived. There was another colony, it's called the Lost Colony, further down the coastline, that did not survive. Everyone died. Now, as I told you, I really think it was from the grace of the Indians, Pocahontas, bringing them, food and herbs to heal them. But actually what happened here is a lot of people ended up eating each other. They said they ate the dead ones, but they cannibalized whatever they could, shoe leather and God knows what else. So unfortunately, it just seems kind of just unfathomable that they could not learn from the Indians, humble themselves enough to learn from these indigenous people who could have shifted the whole history so that they could have learned to take care of themselves and survive rather than planting tobacco and bringing slaves in. But that's what happened. So hopefully we'll do it different now. Also, though, what happened was first the men came over, and then they brought the women, of course, because they wanted to create a settlement and country. But a lot of the Grail lines, the royal Grail lines, escaped England. A lot of people who were under persecution, very high lineages of DNA that had to go underground and hide. Like for example, my family was the Huguenots that escaped France and then into England, and then the English came, over here, and this is where my family is from. So I'm kind of reclaiming my royal lineage now, because I've met a lot of very high, resonating Grail line dragon queens here in Virginia, whether they know it or not. And I'm reconnecting, remembering that, because it is a way that these sacred dragon lineages, these Lemurian and Atlantean high 12 strands of DNA have survived, and we are now able to activate them. So that was a lot of the passage of what was the Exodus that was out. So, there's always the good and the bad in the world of duality, the 3D. So it's important to know what you're looking at, know your history, and then change it. Ciao for now. So I want to wrap this tour up here of Jamestown, the first where America began, and we just had a really great guide. I mean, he was a historian, a scholar, and the scholars, anyone who has really studied history and still has some brain left, cerebral fluid flowing through their minds. This guy, said things that I was just saying. He said history is repeating himself. He's a tourist guide here in Jamestown. He said these guys came over from a corporation. Many of there was about 100 guys, so it was not a popular, conquest. These were most likely desperate people. There were some gentlemen that came, but they all thought they were going to be like on the board of directors or something, and there was 50 of them and they only chose 5 or something. So, but the whole reason they came here was money, conquest, and they signed a document, and he told us the document was totally one-sided, giving King James, the same James who wrote the Bible, a Scottish king, the same James that this town is named after, the river is named after, everything is named after, and all these people, put their lives on the line, and they got like a small percentage of any of the profits, and of course the stockholders, the corporation, and the king got it all, and many of them of course ended up getting killed or died of starvation, because basically the king and country and the corporations are not, loving, giving, caring things. They're greedy organizations that just came here to conquest. And then he explains how this was the hunting ground, that the place where, like the grocery store, the place where people got their food to feed their families, and these people looked around and said, oh, nobody's here, let's take it. And that's why these surrounding tribes, 6 tribes, ended up attacking them, and actually ended up saving their lives, which is really very amazing. So, British history, which is, and my mother's name, her middle name is James, Margaret James Enos. So, it's branded all over me. It's part of my karmic, but I mean, we're all, come from there. The original settlers, America is basically, was a British colony, and now it's a British corporation. If you really want to know what's going on, and I talk about that in my book, The Infinite Human. But, history keeps repeating itself until you change it. And this is the time where we are going to have to change it. Kiki wants to go. Ciao for now. Bye. Bye.